and welcome to Love Unscripted, where we dive into the messy, beautiful world of modern relationships. I'm Clara.
And I'm Leo. We're so excited to launch this podcast series exploring everything from dating apps to friendship dynamics to communication breakthroughs.
That's right. Every episode, we'll be unpacking different aspects of love and connection in today's world. And Leo, I couldn't think of a better topic to kick things off than today's focus: digital dating, navigating love in the app age.
Absolutely. Dating apps have completely transformed how people meet and connect. And as someone who met their last 3 partners online, I've got plenty of firsthand experience with the ups and downs of digital romance.
Same here. I've had my fair share of app dates, some amazing, some, well, let's just say they make for great stories at brunch. And we're not alone. Dating apps have fundamentally changed how an entire generation thinks about romance.
They really have, and we've got so much to cover today, from the evolution of these platforms to profile psychology, communication etiquette, and how to handle app burnout. So let's jump right in.
Let's start by talking about where we are with dating apps in 2025. It's fascinating how much the landscape has shifted, right, Leo?
Completely. You know what? I was reading this article in The Atlantic recently about how young people are actually getting a bit tired of the whole swiping culture. The article literally stated, young people are tired of swiping. Now they want serendipity.
That's so interesting because it reflects this paradox we're living in. Apps are more sophisticated than ever with all these AI-powered matching features, but there's this growing desire for something that feels more authentic, more spontaneous.
Exactly. The article mentioned that finding love has never been easy, but we've come of age in a particularly complicated dating era. The pandemic really disrupted how people developed social skills too.
Oh my gosh, remember when video dates were the only option? I had this one video date where the guy positioned his camera so I was literally staring up his nostrils the entire time. But you know what's crazy? Statistics are showing fewer young people are actually getting into relationships at all.
That's true. And it's not that people don't want connection. I think it's that the app experience has created this strange dynamic where we're both dependent on apps, but also hyper aware of their limitations.
And what about the shift we're seeing in the major players? Remember when it was just Tinder and maybe OkCupid? Now we've got apps specializing in everything from religious preferences to astrological compatibility.
Speaking of app dynamics, let's talk about profile psychology. This is honestly one of my favorite topics because there's such a science behind what makes someone stop and engage with a profile.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what really struck me from that Medium article we read? The author described how, like almost everything in life, behavior is often performance. That's so true with dating profiles. We're essentially performing a version of ourselves.
100%. I was talking to my friend Jamie last week about this, about how we all carefully curate which photos show us in the best light, which hobbies make us seem interesting but not weird.
Right? I mean, I love my pottery collection, but do I lead with that on my profile? Probably not. The article also mentioned how, through social media such as Instagram to dating apps, we become the commodity. That kind of blew my mind. We're literally packaging ourselves.
It's a bit uncomfortable to think about, but it's true. We're creating a brand of ourselves. I try to be really authentic in my profiles, but I'm still making choices about what to highlight.
I had this realization last year when I was updating my profiles. I caught myself thinking, will this hiking photo make me seem outdoorsy enough? And then I thought, wait, I've been hiking exactly twice in my life. Why am I trying to market myself as Bear Grylls?
That's hilarious. But you bring up a good point about the balance between strategic presentation and authenticity. I think the profiles that work best show a genuine person, but in their best light, not a complete fiction.
Exactly. And that authenticity becomes even more important when you actually meet in person. Nothing worse than that moment when someone realizes you look nothing like your highly filtered photos from 2018. So once you've created that perfect profile, the next challenge is actually communicating effectively. Digital etiquette is such a minefield.
Oh my gosh, tell me about it. I still cringe thinking about some of my early app conversations. I think I started one with, "Hey, beautiful," and got immediately unmatched. Lesson learned.
We've all been there. What's fascinating is how we're essentially selling ourselves from the moment we create a profile, as that article pointed out. Our initial messages are part of that communication of our personal brand.
Absolutely. And there's a real art to that first message. Too generic, and you blend in with the crowd. Too specific, and you might come across as intense.
I found asking a thoughtful question about something specific in their profile works best. Shows you actually read what they wrote. Though I admit I once commented on what I thought was a guy's pet rabbit, but it turned out to be his dinner.
Ooh, that's too funny. But you know what's also tricky? Pacing the conversation. Too much back and forth without suggesting a meetup can lead to that dreaded pen pal situation where it just fizzles out.
The eternal question, when is the right time to move things offline? I used to wait too long, and by the time I suggested meeting up, we'd exhausted all possible conversation topics.
I think that's why we're seeing this shift away from endless swiping and messaging. People are realizing the actual connection happens face to face, and apps are just the introduction tool.
That's a perfect segue into our next topic, making that transition from virtual to reality. This is where things get real, sometimes awkwardly real.
Oh, the first meeting jitters. I still get them, even after countless app dates. There's always that moment when you walk into the coffee shop scanning for someone who hopefully looks like their photos.
And that split second where you're both like, is that them? Should I wave? What if it's not them and I wave at a stranger? So much potential for awkwardness.
I actually have a funny story about that. Last year, I saw someone who looked exactly like my date's photos, went up to him super confidently and said, "Hey, Mark, great to finally meet you." Turns out it wasn't Mark. It was Mark's identical twin brother who happened to be at the same cafe.
No way. What are the odds? But seriously, planning that first meeting is so important. It sets the tone for everything that follows. I always suggest somewhere public, casual, and with an easy exit strategy if things aren't clicking.
Absolutely. Coffee or a quick drink works perfectly because you can extend it if things are going well or wrap it up if you're not feeling it. What I find fascinating is how differently chemistry comes across in person versus text.
That's so true. I've had amazing text chemistry with people who I felt absolutely nothing for in person, and vice versa. Some people are just better at connecting face to face than through messages.
I think that's why that Atlantic article mentioned young people wanting more serendipity. There's something about spontaneous in person connection that digital interaction just can't replicate, no matter how advanced the apps get.
Let's talk about something I think many listeners will relate to, dating app burnout. It's real and it hits hard.
Oh, I've been there. That point where you open the app and just feel exhausted. Suddenly, the thought of starting another conversation with "how's your week going" makes you want to throw your phone out the window.
Right? That's why it's so important to recognize the signs early. For me, it's when I start feeling cynical about every profile I see. Oh, another guy with a fish photo? How original. That's my cue to take a break.
Mine is when I catch myself sending the exact same messages to multiple people. That's when I know I'm not being present anymore, just going through the motions.
Setting boundaries is crucial too. I used to feel like I had to respond to messages immediately, even late at night. Now I have a rule, no dating apps after 9 p.m. or before my morning coffee.
That's such a healthy approach. I also think it's important to remind ourselves that apps are just one way to meet people. I met my college girlfriend through a mutual friend, and my neighbor just got engaged to someone she met at a pottery class.
Yes. When I'm feeling app fatigue, I try to put more energy into real world social situations. Join that book club, go to that neighborhood event, say yes to that dinner party invitation. The best connections often happen when you're not specifically looking for them.
Absolutely. And sometimes taking a break from dating altogether is the healthiest choice. I took 6 months off last year to focus on myself, and when I came back to it, I had a much clearer idea of what I was looking for.
As we wrap up today's episode, I think it's worth acknowledging that dating apps have fundamentally changed how we approach finding love, for better and for worse.
They absolutely have. They've opened up possibilities to meet people we might never have crossed paths with otherwise. But they've also created this strange paradox where we have more options than ever, yet finding meaningful connection can feel harder.
I love how that Atlantic article phrased it. Finding love has never been easy, but this is a particularly tricky moment for romance. We're navigating uncharted waters with these technologies.
At the same time, I remain optimistic. I think people are getting smarter about how they use these tools, setting better boundaries, being more authentic in their profiles, and moving more quickly to real-world connections.
Absolutely. And remember what we discussed about the trend towards serendipity? I think that's a positive sign that people are reclaiming some of the spontaneity and magic that can get lost in the algorithmic approach to dating.
I couldn't agree more. At the end of the day, these apps are just tools. It's what we bring to them that matters. Our authenticity, our openness to connection, our willingness to be vulnerable, that's what leads to meaningful relationships, whether they start online or off.
Well said, Leo. And that brings us to the end of our very first episode of Love Unscripted. We've covered so much ground today, from the evolution of dating apps to profile psychology, digital communication, making that online to offline transition, and handling app burnout.
We sure have. And next week, we'll be expanding our horizons with cultural dating differences, love around the world, exploring how dating norms vary across different English-speaking cultures. We'll examine how cultural backgrounds influence relationship expectations, communication styles, and what it means to be in a cross-cultural relationship.
I can't wait for that one. And a huge thank you to all our listeners for joining us today. We'd love to hear your thoughts, experiences, and questions about navigating the world of dating apps.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with friends who might benefit from these conversations. Until next time, keep your hearts open and your dating profiles authentic.
This has been Love Unscripted. I'm Clara.
And I'm Leo. See you next time.